Most people think you become confident by changing who you are, but this video will prove that you become confident by changing how you see people. So today I'm sharing insights I've learned as a therapist that have surprised me the most, but also once you understand them, will naturally build confidence and make you stop feeling intimidated. The first thing is the things people feel most ashamed of are the most universal experiences. So if you think about your biggest secret or the worst mistake you've made or a very uncomfortable experience you had growing up or recently that you feel like is impossible for you to share with anyone because you just feel so embarrassed about it, that thing is probably a universal experience. And it takes me to the quote, "Nothing human is alien to me." And the way I interpret this quote is that whatever one of us experience, most likely most of us experience. So if you think about an experience that you are ashamed of, whether it's a traumatic experience or something you've done, automatically you feel more intimidated by others and less confident about yourself because you have these mistakes that you've made that you now identify with. As a therapist, I can confidently tell you that if one person is experiencing it, most people are experiencing it. So you're not alone in what you feel and what you think and the things that you've experienced. The second lesson I've learned is people who have a difficult time admitting wrongdoings, mistakes, or apologizing are not arrogant, they're fragile. So the inability to apologize or self-reflect or admit mistakes is one of the traits narcissists have. So it doesn't mean that whoever is unable to apologize is automatically a narcissist, but it is a big trait or characteristic of narcissists, which is why it's actually really painful to be in a relationship with a person who is unable to self-reflect, admit mistakes, or apologize. And that can be a parent-child relationship, it can be a sibling relationship, it can be a friendship, or it can be a romantic relationship. It's actually very painful to be in a relationship with those people because you love them, you want to be in a relationship with them, but it makes having a healthy relationship and healthy communication really difficult. And it also makes you feel really insecure because it feels as if it's always your fault and you're always the only one apologizing. What most people don't understand is they think people who are unable to apologize or unable to self-reflect and admit mistakes are these big arrogant monsters who always believe they're right and they never do anything wrong and it's always the other person. The reason they have to think that way, the reason they have to believe that everything I'm doing and saying is right and if there are issues it's your fault, is because they have a very fragile sense of self, meaning they have a very rigid and fragile self-perception and self-belief. So it's more a fear that their identity would collapse if they were to acknowledge imperfection. Whereas if you think about people who are confident or have high self-worth, they're able to say, I made a mistake or what I did was wrong or what I said was wrong without feeling like it defines them or they identify with that mistake. So they're confident in who they are, and because they're confident in who they are, they can say, oh yeah, I made a mistake and apologize because it doesn't define them, because it doesn't shatter their self-perception. They still know who they are, they're still confident, and they're objective enough to know that, yeah, sometimes I make mistakes and that mistake doesn't define my identity or who I am. I don't identify with my flaws or with my mistakes. So confident people are able to show humility. Fragile people project arrogance, not because they are arrogant, but because the sense of self is almost like a thin glass that once you tap it, it completely shatters because it's so thin and fragile. And if you think of a glass that's sturdy and strong, you could, tap it, throw things at it, it's still strong. It doesn't shatter, it doesn't break. It's strong, it's sturdy. And that's how you can see people who are able to admit mistakes versus people who are not able to admit mistakes. Number 3 is avoiding past pain can look lighthearted, but shows up in unhealthy ways. What I mean by that is when people come to me and we work through their trauma or something they've experienced that is really difficult, and at some point they come to me and they say, why am I even doing this? Because so-and-so in my life who is completely oblivious about their past trauma seems to have a great time. They seem to just go through life and be super lighthearted and nothing is deep and everything is fun and no joke is harmful and everything is happy and everything is light. And when they say that, what comes up for me is that avoidance can often look like strength or resilience on the surface, but unresolved pain often shows up indirectly And that can be through judgment or criticizing other people. So people who haven't really worked on themselves are really harsh and judgmental towards other people, and for them it's not a big deal. They don't really sit with that feeling of, was what I said right? Did I hurt them? Did I not hurt them? They don't care. They're avoidant about the past pain, therefore they project that externally as well. Another way it shows up is through gossip or comparison. So for example, if someone didn't do any internal work, they might feel some sort of maybe envy or jealousy, and because they're not able to admit how they're feeling, they usually say, oh, I don't like this person, they are so annoying. Whereas someone who had done the internal work, they can say, I just noticed that I've compared myself to this person and I feel jealous or I feel envious about this thing. And they're able to self-reflect. And because they're able to self-reflect and sit with that, of course it's uncomfortable. It's so much easier to say if something is wrong with them than I actually sit with a very uncomfortable emotion. Once you have awareness of something, you completely take away the power of it. But if you never admit that you feel envious or feel jealous at times, you always turn to, let's say, gossip, because you can't admit that what you're actually feeling is about you and not about them. Another way avoidance shows up is through emotional reactivity and irritability. Irritability. I don't know how you say it. Irritability. Irritable. Another way it shows up is through being emotional, reactive, and irritable. So people who've done the inner work, when they feel irritable or they can feel the emotions bubble up and come up, they're able to sit for a moment before it comes out and say, oh, I actually feel really annoyed. However, people who haven't done the work, when they feel annoyed, before they can even sit with it, their mouth works faster than their brain. So before they can even think, I'm irritated, what am I irritated about? Let me sit with it, let me think about it for a minute, because they haven't practiced that. Self-reflection is like a muscle that you need to practice, because they haven't practiced that enough to self-reflect and think, okay, I feel irritable, what's going on? It just comes out and they just lash out on someone. Let's say, I don't know, you're late somewhere, and instead of thinking, well, we're actually really annoyed that we're late, they just shout at the person who's driving and saying, why are you driving like that? We're late because of you. So they let out their anger on someone else rather than just saying, I'm actually just so frustrated and irritated that we're going to be late. But because they don't have the ability and they haven't practiced self-reflection enough, they just lash out and react. Another way avoidance shows up is through subtle resentment in relationships. So if you carry some sort of resentment or anger towards a parent, automatically you carry resentment and anger towards other people, because that was the first model of a relationship. That was your first model and first experience of a relationship. And your parents as a child represent the world. So if you're angry with a parent and you haven't worked through it, you feel angry at people or at the world. That's why people have this subtle resentment and anger that they're just carrying with them. And it shows up in different ways, through backhanded jokes, comments, lashing out, reacting, being irritable, being frustrated. It shows up. Feeling emotionally triggered without understanding why. So if you haven't done the work, things trigger you and you don't know why. And that's a problem because if you don't know why, you can't really work on it, or you can't work through it. Fifth lesson I learned is that revenge and unforgiveness keeps you attached to that person. In the world we're living, we are imperfect people with imperfect people around us, living in an imperfect environment. So it's guaranteed that we've been hurt or we've hurt other people. And especially when we've been hurt by other people, because that's what we usually tend to see more than when we've hurt other people. When we've been hurt by other people, there is this desire to seek revenge. That's just how we are. If someone hurts me, I feel like I need to hurt them back to feel like it's fair. Now it's fair and now we're equal. And we think that revenge will give me this sense of relief. It will make me feel like they've deserved this and what I did is right and now things feel fair. Same with unforgiveness. So we tend to not forgive people because we think they don't deserve forgiveness. Why would I forgive them? What they did was terrible and they don't deserve my forgiveness. And that is a misconception. So a lot of times with revenge, people disregard what they've done to you and all they can see is what you're doing to them. And now, even though it was revenge, it was a response to what they did to you, you've become the bad one. You've become the person who hurt them. Because a lot of times people don't see it as a response, they see it as a reaction. They don't know. A lot of times they disregard what they did, or they don't care what they did, or maybe they don't have the self-reflection to know what they did. All they can see is that you've hurt them, and they don't see it as revenge. They just see it as something you did out of nowhere, and now they feel like they're in the right and that you're crazy, and that makes you go crazy because you think, wow, I've just did back what you did to me. So revenge is never a good idea, and it doesn't actually give you that sense of relief. It actually causes more conflict and it causes more issues. Same with unforgiveness. Unforgiveness means you feel entitled to keep feeling hurt, you feel entitled to feel upset, you feel entitled to feel angry, and therefore you don't want to forgive. But that unforgiveness keeps you emotionally attached. So let's say if a friend hurt me and I don't want to forgive them, that means I'll keep carrying that resentment and that anger and that hurt with me. Unforgiveness is like this invisible cord that keeps us stuck together, because that anger that I'm feeling, that keeps me emotionally attached to them. But forgiveness is almost like cutting that cord and saying, I don't want to hold on to that. Forgiveness doesn't mean you agree with what they did. Forgiveness means you respect your own inner peace and you want liberation from those difficult and uncomfortable and unnecessary emotions. One, forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. You can forgive someone and still choose not to have them in your life. And forgiveness doesn't mean that you agree with what they did. It doesn't mean agreement, it means acceptance. So you don't agree with what they did, but you accept that it happened and you move on. You allow yourself to move on. It might take time, it might take weeks, months, years, depending on what happened. But eventually, forgiveness is the thing that cuts the cord and cuts that emotional attachment to that person, to that experience, and to that pain. Next point is the way people treat others is a reflection of how they treat themselves internally. We see people who are being judgmental, harsh, looking down on others, being mean, whatever it is. And we have this like hate and this anger, that resentment towards them. And I'm not saying we should agree with what they're doing, but I believe if we understood that how they treat other people is a reflection of how they treat themselves, we wouldn't feel the need to show people how bad they are or show them how wrong they are. We would just think, okay, it's something going on in their internal world that are projecting to others. I just don't want to be part of it, and we just remove ourselves from that situation. But a lot of times that pain that we're carrying comes from trying to make the other person understand that what they're doing is wrong, or how they've hurt you is wrong. And I believe there is a place for that, but I think just having the understanding that if someone is judgmental, critical, mean, harsh towards you, don't try to get back at them, don't try to seek revenge, don't try to make them understand if they're not able or willing to. Just know that that's just a reflection of what's going on in their internal world. You don't need to understand what's going on for them internally, and you don't also need to take it personally. Not saying it's not painful, not saying it's not harmful, not saying it doesn't hurt, but at some point I think it's important for us to understand that it's not a reflection of who you are, it's a reflection of what's going on for them. And I believe that would, one, intimidate us less as people, and two, simplify and clarify things for us so much, because we often think other people's behaviors is a reflection of us, but usually it's not. Usually it's about what's going on for them. And I feel like it's so liberating understanding that, knowing, okay, what they're doing and what they're saying to me, one, I don't need to accept it, I'm not excusing it, but I also don't need to take it personally, because it's more about them than it is about me. Number 6 is self-compassion accelerates growth, healing, and emotional maturity. So a lot of times the way we want to change is through criticizing ourselves, being like, why did you do this? This is not good enough. You're so bad at this, or you need to change this. And believing that we can bully ourselves into healing, or we can bully ourselves into growth or maturity. And that doesn't work. Self-compassion is what creates emotional safety, which then allows for honest self-reflection. And self-criticism is actually what keeps us stuck in the same cycles of shame. You might bully yourself into external achievements, but internally, self-criticism actually keeps you stuck, and you feel frustrated at yourself, you feel irritable, and it doesn't help you to grow in your healing, in your growth, and in emotional maturity. So the pattern I see with people I work with is that people who are able to have self-compassion grow so much faster and heal so much faster than people who keep beating themselves up for past mistakes or things they've done. So shame keeps you stuck. Self-compassion helps you to move forward. And I believe when we have self-compassion, we also have the ability to be more compassionate towards other people. So if I beat myself up for some things, for a mistake I've made 6 months ago or 3 years ago, most probably I'm going to be quite harsh with you when you make a mistake, which goes back to the point of we project our internal experience. And just to clarify, self-compassion doesn't remove accountability. It actually makes accountability possible, because self-compassion is not the same thing as avoidance. It's self-compassion is I'm aware of my mistakes, I'm aware of what I did wrong, I take accountability, I rectify if needed, and I accept that and move forward with that, with my knowledge. Whereas avoidance is like, what I did wasn't even that bad, whatever, I don't care. Avoidance is actually quite ignorant, whereas self-compassion is honest. And the last point, which I believe is the most important one, is that external success does not automatically create internal fulfillment. So right now, as a society, as a culture, as people, we're chasing some sort of external success, whether it's advancement in our careers, whether it's pay rise, whether it's upgrading a car, upgrading a home, buying a home, like earning more money, buying more things. It's all about possessions, accumulating possessions, having more things, having more tangible things. And external success can definitely improve comfort and opportunity. However, I believe I need to work hard, whether it's 10 hours a day, whether it's 12 hours a day, I need to work hard and upgrade my home or upgrade my car, because sitting in a better car will make me happier. And even hearing and saying that probably sounds funny, but that's what we believe. We believe that if I have a bigger home, or if I have a better car, or if I have clothes with labels on them, that will make me happier, more confident. So as people, we spend 20, 30 years of our lives working 10, 12 hours a day to get the internal fulfillment we believe that external thing will give us. And to some extent, it might be true. It might give us some sort of comfort, it might give us some sort of freedom, and that's completely fine. But it doesn't replace the things that we need to work on internally. So if I have anxiety, or if I don't have internal peace, or if I deal with envy or jealousy, or if I deal with comparison, having a better home or having a better car or having more clothes doesn't automatically heal what's going on inside. It might cover it up better from the outside when people look at me, but inside, internally, it doesn't remove the internal struggles. And that doesn't mean that external success is unhealthy or anything like that. But what it does mean is that if you chase external things, external success, in the hope of it making you feel better about yourself, or giving you internal peace, or removing your comparison or your insecurities, it won't do that. It will add a lot of beautiful things, but it won't replace the inner work that you need to do. And as people, if we spend more time working on ourselves than chasing external success, we would get the home for the home. We wouldn't get the home because we would think it will give us recognition, or it will give us happiness, or it will remove all the internal struggles. So success can change how life looks, but internal alignment changes how life feels. So these are the lessons I've learned from sitting with people. Let me know in the comments how you found this video and which point resonated with you the most.